Welcome to all of you. Can't tell you how happy I am to see your faces, or at least to see your eyes, whatever we get to see. We'll play this month by month, and we'll see whether this is the beginning and we get to keep opening, or if we have to pull back, we'll just leave that up and juggle as we are so good at doing. So thank you all for coming and for being brave enough to show up today. We don't have very much business today. Martha, you want to go to the agenda? But it's, of course, important business. The first note is that the December party, sadly, we've canceled. The mask mandate is still in place, and the idea of trying to have a party with everyone with a mask on and distance we were looking for sites and trying to work with that, and it just seemed like not a good idea. Plus, the idea of exposing people to some risk before their own family holidays. So enjoy today, and we will look forward to the new year of opening up more, and we hope enjoying each other's company even better. And there's still going to be interest groups going, so be sure you get involved with your interest groups. We do have a holiday project. Melanie is here, and so she might want to say a little bit about this. Melanie, want to say what the project is? We've emailed you about it, and many people have already signed up. But Melanie, sure, give us a brief.
Yes, so I went to the Women's Empowerment event last Saturday, and we were already looking for a project that we could do, a community service project for the holidays. And I saw a presentation by April, I forget her last name, a director at Women at Worth, and they assist women and families that are to a variety of challenges. And so after I heard her speak and we had a break, I went and talked to her about that we were looking for a project, and she said, oh man, we have all these families, we need help with it. The person who's in charge of it has quit. And so I thought this is a perfect project for us. And so that's where first she said 31 families. I'm glad it became 13 because there's 55 people in these 13 families that they're assisting, which is kind of amazing. Several families of 6. And so there's adults and children, and we have forms for each of them. Each family has filled out a form of what they are hoping to, that they believe would be good for them to receive and or their children to receive. And so that's what we're doing. We're pulling it together. And I think it's a great project because, the needs were, so significant. One family with a son having liver problems, liver failure problems, one with a father who died from COVID, another one who's a single mom, long-term COVID symptoms, can't work, so this would be a great way for us to step in and provide this. Yes.
Can we just write a check or give you some money?
Yes.
How can we do that?
Bob can answer that better than me because I am going on vacation on Monday.
Yeah.
For 2 weeks. So, but.
Yeah, I can answer that part. We can totally use, not everybody likes to shop. I fully identify with that. Money is very useful. One of the families lost their home, so along with their home, all their possessions. So gift cards and cash is wonderful. I have 4 or 5 people who have already done that. You can either mail a check to AAUW, Nevada County Branch, at our P.O. Box 326. See me if you want the address more. Or you can donate online at our webpage. We'll take donations, and you can, in the memo line, it lets you say Holiday Project. And again, this is completely voluntary. If you are able and you would like to, there's an opportunity. Don't feel you have to do it. I know many of us have families that need our help, or you've already given to the food bank or whatever, but if you're able to, it's a chance to do some good with people who really need it. Any other questions, email me or email Susie Monery Wilson, who is putting together the list and assigning people. We're going to try and get it out soon, so if you do go shopping over Thanksgiving, you have time to get presents and know who you're shopping for, since, as we all have heard once or twice, the supply chain is a bit slow lately. The other good news right after that is I would like Stephanie, who is here somewhere. Then I'll talk about the strategic plan. Oh, here's Stephanie. Jean Poff has earned a remarkable distinction, and Stephanie would like to present that to her. So, Martha, if you can go forward a slide. Thank you.
Where is she? Where's Jean?
She's right here in the middle.
There's Jean. It's so nice to meet you. This is the first time I've met her, so we've talked now. It's a pleasure. Are we allowed to do that? Are we supposed to talk?
Right.
Anyway, recently Jean was honored by the National AAUW as a lifetime member. So for any of you that are unfamiliar with that is, that means 50 years of being an AAUW member. So if you haven't met Jean yet, clearly she's been here for a while, but a few other branches as well. But she brings a lot of experience. She's been a dietitian and teaching her whole life. In fact, she's been using our lodestone to advertise in her piano lessons for a long time now. So she's been supportive in a lot of different ways. I welcome you to introduce yourself to her and also give her a congratulations. This is a huge honor, and we appreciate the support from National. And also take a look in the lodestone this month because there's an article on Jean. We had a quick chat, so she has her own article this month. Do you want to say anything also, Jean?
I just wonder how many other people might be eligible for this. I just found it in some of the literature and filled out a form, and I'm not the youngest person here.
That's good. So if anybody wants any more information, by all means, I can help you locate that. And if you need help applying or anything like that, we can walk you through that as well. So again, congratulations, Jean. Thank you again for the support for women and children and everything else.
We do have a few. She's not the only honorary member who has belonged for 50 years. Nancy Nouse is one of them, and I'd have to check to see who the other members are, but it's a remarkable achievement. The only other piece of business before I turn it over to Veronda for our interesting program is just a notice that the board approved a strategic plan, and Martha, that's up a couple slides. This plan was approved by the board that it'll be in the lodestone, and membership will vote in January. So you don't have to read this, it'll be in the lodestone so you can read it much better. But basically we have 4 goals for our branch. They are, the first goal is to champion equal access to educational opportunities and diverse career pathways for women and girls. That's important to this branch. We've been doing it. We're reiterating that that is one of our chief goals. The second goal is, in collaboration with community partners, to work to overcome educational, economic, and societal barriers for women and girls. Our community outreach is not as robust as it has been in the past, and we have a committee working on making that, reinvigorating that, of which Melanie is part. The third goal is to do with build and sustain a diverse membership that promotes personal and professional growth as well as friendships. I think we might be a unique group in that friendships are so critical to this group, the interest groups and the support we get from each other. It's not just our mission to help advance equity, it's our mission to support each other and build friendships and connections. So that is a goal and one of our most important goals. And our last one is to enhance branch financial stability by increasing and diversifying our revenue. Certainly, being unable to hold fundraisers these 2 years has shown us that we need to have a more diverse and able funding stream, so that's another project that the board is working on, and there are several goals here for us to, underneath that, as avenues to achieve that. So you'll see more about this. We won't vote until January. It'll be in the lodestone for the next 2 months, so you'll have time to see more. Each one of these has a detailed action plan with how board members are going to try and achieve those things, and the membership will try and achieve them. We'll have links to that, to the document also. And that is it for the business. I'm going to turn it over to Mary to introduce our speaker and learn myself.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to see you, even with masks on. It's a great attendance, and we even get to show a video to the people that couldn't make it, that elected to stay home. So I think we have the best of both worlds here. It's my distinct honor to present our guest today, Veronda Lyons. Her father's name was Byron, so that's where the start of her name comes from. She is a video journalist. She attended and graduated from the University of Arkansas in Pine Bluff, and then the UC Berkeley School of Journalism with a master's degree. She's worked in the public and the private sectors in jobs. She's been a public information officer and a journalist. She currently works at CalMatters, a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization headquartered in Sacramento, but with journalists all over the state. And they write about California policy that affects everyday lives. Her work has been on PBS and throughout the California media. She writes on things like the recall of the governor or the California courts, any of the California agencies and how that, or our government and how that might affect your life. Today we have it seems like a sea of news. I'm a journalism major myself, and things have changed so much. So this topic is really kind of near and dear to my heart. It seems that there's just a sea of news sources, that we have cable news now and internet sources, and who do you trust? Who do you find your information from? And isn't your head just kind of swimming in what is truth and what is made up? So how do we find truthful, well-balanced sources of information to make wise and informed choices? Let's turn the tables on Veronda Lyons now, and let's be the ones who ask her the questions about journalism. Please welcome Veronda Lyons.
Let me get my microphone going. I'm sorry. Can you hear me? Are we good? Hi. So, good morning. Thanks for having me. Mary reached out to the Sacramento Press Club, and I'm a board member, and they said, anyone want to go up and talk about journalism? And of course, me, I raised my hand. So I'm here, and I'm thankful to be here, and considering this has been a rough 2 years, so I'm very honored and really thankful just to be here with you all. So journalism in 2021. When you think about journalism, sort of what do you think about? Hard news. Some people think, cable news or all different kinds of things that say news, but maybe or maybe not it's news. So today we'll cover that, and we'll cover journalism in 2021. I don't have a clicker. So who am I? I'm Byrhonda. As you know, I'm a Sacramento Press Club board member, which I just said. I'm a justice reporter and a video journalist. One thing you'll know about today's media is a lot of journalists do both things. They may have a podcast, they may write, they may do video, they may do audio, and that's just the nature of media today. It's no one thing anymore. It's not, you can just write in the paper. In a lot of places, there are no papers, so you're digital. So you have to think about Google search. You have to think about all these different things when you're talking about news, when you're pitching stories, and when you're thinking about writing stories. I am originally from Arkansas, moved to California for journalism school, and just kind of never went back to Arkansas. You can go to the next one. So we'll cover the difference between a journalist and a commentator. We'll cover the changes in the media landscape and the future of news. News change, media technology changes every day. So some of the things I may say may be obsolete tomorrow, hopefully not, or obsolete in a few years. But the key is understanding what you're taking in. And as long as you know what to look for, you can kind of make decisions on whether it's the news you want to hear or whether it's not. So the first thing we'll cover is, what is a journalist? First things first, journalist is not opinion. They're a reporter. They can do text, as I said, they can do video, they can do radio, they can do podcasting. They're investigators, and they are required to consider, explore, and present both sides of an argument. Now, there is this conversation happening within journalism. Well, how can you present both sides of an argument when, someone is saying climate change is not real and someone is saying climate change is real when the science shows that obviously it's real? So those are those kinds of arguments. But for the most part, if you read something and it says a reporter, rest assured, most times, 99% of the time, that reporter has gone through editors. The editor has said, oh, have you considered this? They've talked about different points of view, and they're trying to distill information in a way that can inform the community. I can guarantee you, I don't know any reporter that wakes up in the morning and says, today I want to deceive the American public. We don't do it. Are there people who do that? Yes. And oftentimes they're not reporters, they are commentators. Now, when you watch TV news, look at how they describe the person. Is the person described as a reporter? Are they described as a commentator? And you can see it on the bottom, it'll say, I don't know, it might say Veronda Lyons, and it'll say columnist or a commentator. If it says that, then I'm giving you my what? I'm not giving you anything but my opinion. Now, the issue is that most people do not understand that, because years ago, if you wanted an opinion, you grab a newspaper and you do what? But you don't have that anymore. So a lot of people do not understand that when you watch, what's her name, Joy Reid, or when you watch Tucker Carlson, it's commentators. It's not journalism. The rules are different. But the goal is to get what? Eyeballs on the TV. So if I keep you outraged or if I keep you engaged, then you're going to continue to watch me. You're going to continue to get upset. You're going to continue to engage with my kinds of content. And so you have all these different kinds of mediums trying to get eyeballs. So sometimes the headlines are outrageous. Sometimes the comments are outrageous. And it's the worst of us. We can't stop watching. Either your blood pressure is going to go skyrocket because you're mad or because you agree with the person. So understanding the difference between a commentator and a journalist can save you a lot of headache. It saves me a lot of headache. It kind of angers some of my friends because I go home and I turn off MSNBC and my mom gets really upset with me. I'm like, I'm not watching that, but it's important to know that that's on both sides of the aisle. It's not just one side of the aisle. It's on both sides of the aisle. So once more people understand this, then maybe the American public can understand news, but there's an engagement factor and there's an entertainment factor to a lot of the cable news, all the cable news mostly that you see on TV. Okay. So this is a, we can have a philosophical argument. I mean, I was talking to my husband about it. He's like, I don't think that, you can compare the bottom part of the liberal side to the bottom part of the conservative side. I'm like, yeah, maybe not. We could have a philosophical argument about it. But I typically try to I read everything, probably too much, but I'm usually in the middle. I'll read some opinions, I'll read the National Review, I'll read the Intercept. I read a lot of information. And this chart is a nice window into the American press. Now, one thing that's missing from this chart is what? The Facebook, that's true. Social media is true. But one thing that was glaring to me from this chart is that there is no local news. Unless you live in New York, I think New York, maybe DC has a little local news in the Washington Post, but there's no local news to really understand the landscape of your local news organizations. And that,
Veronda, those of us in the back can't see that chart as well. Could you just show?
oh, okay. So at the top, you have original fact reporting, and we have neutral balance of bias. You have AP, Reuters, Bloomberg, ABC News, CBS News, and then to the right, you have fact reporting. You have the Wall Street Journal. How many of you all subscribe to the Wall Street Journal? One person. How many of you all subscribe to the New York Times? Okay. How many of you all, let's see, where else do you have to subscribe to? The New Yorker? The Economist? Okay. How many of you all subscribe to something that would be considered more conservative and something that would be considered more liberal, like a balance of information? We have one, okay. So that's important. So I wake up in the morning, I read the New York Times, and it may have an article about something. I instantly go over to the Wall Street Journal and read their article about probably the same thing. Having a balance of information, understand whether you agree with it or not, taking in different viewpoints can be helpful as you're having conversations with your friends, trying to convince someone of something different. So you have the New York Times here, you have the Wall Street Journal here, you have the Washington Post, the Times, the National Review is to the right, the Standard, Slate, Daily Beast, Mike, I think that's actually gone away now. The Intercept, The Atlantic. So if you look at it, it's giving you sort of things that skew a little bit more liberal. You have a little bit more analysis that skew a little bit more liberal than you do analysis that skew more conservative. And then you kind of have CNN right here on the line. How many of you all are big CNN watchers? Yeah. I mean, I watch it. You know, sometimes I scream at the TV and sometimes I don't. This isn't, you know, by any means, you know, a grail or any means definitely the way the news works. It just gives you some idea of how things can work or work together or work in opposites. Now, down here it has QAnon, I think a little too high. I think that should be all the way down at the bottom. But again, it still has InfoWars, and InfoWars is nowhere near what it used to be. This diagram was created in 1920, 3 years ago. Some of these newsrooms are not even functioning anymore. That's how quickly things can change in the media landscape, especially when it comes to digital media. Any questions? All right, we can move on. So, the thing missing from there was local news. How many of you all read your local news? Wow. Now this is spectacular. I think I was reading, what's the name of the paper? Yes, I was reading it a couple days ago when I was getting ready for this presentation. Really great reporting. How many of you all trust them? Maybe I was reading something else. Wait. What makes you not trust them, if anyone care to elaborate? No? Okay.
I'm new here, so I just learned about reading about the mine controversy because of the union. And I believe that they printed some results of a survey that was not a very carefully done survey.
Is that where most of the trust kind of eroded? Before then, did you all trust them? So within journalism, one thing, as you can see, or I assume it's this one thing, can erode all the trust that you have spent decades building. And I don't know the details of what happened, but it's something that affects a lot of newsrooms. For example, I think for national news, the New York Times has had some issues with trust, and CNN, when we had President Trump, a lot of people don't trust CNN, some people do, and it became more of a political thing than actual, like, your community newsroom, which you all felt burned you or didn't present the information in a way that was representative of the community, and that can have a lasting effect. So how many of you all stopped subscribing after that? Oh.
One paper.
I was going to say, I don't exactly not trust them, but the union represents the whole community, and we have a very divided community. So it's not that I don't trust them, but that I read what they put with my knowledge of the community to guide me, so that I know that they've got to represent more than just my interests.
And I would just say that I trust them to present alternate views. So we had also plenty of information about the survey being by opinion pages, that the survey was questionable about mine. So I think it does, it's not perfect and maybe not as detailed as the news we like, but I think that they do try to get different sides out there.
I was on their editorial board for about 4 years, and I found them to have complete integrity. Well, if they made a mistake, they would admit it. But I found them to have complete integrity.
And she did lots of great, I didn't know you were off now, but lots of great editorialism.
Wow.
I think the other thing you have to remember is because they have such a small staff, a lot of the material that they print was submitted. So you have to make sure that you see where it is submitted, who is submitting it and stuff, realizing it might not be by a journalist.
Anything else? I think it's important, just like, what's your name? Shanti. Just like Shanti just said, I was on the editorial board and I found that they had complete integrity. Knowing someone who is a reporter, knowing someone who is connected to delivering the information allows you to see an insight into a newsroom, and you can feel connected to the information. So your friend Shanti would not just blatantly misinform the community. That's not who she is, and that's not what she's about. So a lot of times we get so staked into national news, which is people, and it's hard to connect with that beyond much other than politics, really. So if you learn nothing else, pay for local news, subscribe to your local news. All right. So what's changed in media? Laws. So for example, there was a fairness doctrine which was created around the 50s, abolished in the late 80s, and basically it required broadcasters to discuss controversial things of public interest and air contrasting views. Oftentimes you'll look on YouTube, or I'll look on YouTube, and I'll find people having conversations about things that I would never see on news today. And they're very intense conversations, and they're very critical views, and some people would call them radical views, but they happened. And sometimes, because of the way the media is now, it's just who sits and watches TV and, is really there for deep thought or deep understanding. I mean, you watch PBS, that's one reason, but that's one thing that has changed. The other is the Telecommunications Act of 1996, signed by Bill Clinton. I'm sure you all may have heard about it, but basically it gave way to large conglomerates. It wasn't supposed to do that, and as we know, policy doesn't always turn out the way it's intended. And so what happened was a lot of news organizations went or media companies like NBC went and bought up a lot of, radio stations, locally owned TV stations. And I probably think about this act too much when I'm driving down the street and you flip the radio station, it's the same music all the time. I'm like, oh my gosh, can I just find something that's different? So that's one thing that changed the media landscape. The other thing, which is huge, which President Trump spoke a lot about, was Section 230, which is, it allows, newsrooms are considered publishers of content. Facebook is not a publisher of content. So Facebook is not responsible for, Jane Doe who posts libelous material about her neighbor. Facebook is not responsible for that. Facebook can't be sued for that. There's no way to hold Facebook accountable really for a lot of things that are posted on their site because they are not considered a publisher. Newsrooms are publishers. So to post on Facebook, you can post anything on Facebook and pray you don't get sued. And typically, if you're posting something libelous, the person doesn't have the resources to sue you anyway. But you can post anything on Facebook, doesn't make it true, doesn't have to be true. Newsrooms, because they are publishers and they can be sued, guess what they have to do? Fact check, they have to edit. They are concerned about being sued. That's something that they have to be concerned about because otherwise they'll be put out of business. Facebook is very different, which is one reason why you have so much nonsense on Facebook. And one way to pick out, Facebook news or things on Facebook is to Google it. If you see something that's really outrageous, chances are it's probably not true. So if I see something on Facebook and A, I don't see a link, I'm going and I'm Googling it. B, I don't get any news from Facebook, period, really, anymore. But that's just me. So next slide. What else has changed? Everything. Yes.
So I had a question about the responsibilities of newsrooms, having editors, fact checkers, and stuff. But when you look at the cable networks, it seems like that's not really going on because they're commentators as opposed to reporters. So that seems to...
It's entertainment.
Yeah, but I don't really get where, like, a organization, say like Fox News, where they have commentators, in prime time in the evenings, but they do have like a few serious reporters, like Chris Waltz. So I don't understand how those things, those two things are going on within the same organization, and do they not have responsibilities that the commentators are reporting facts, which obviously a lot of commentators are not reporting facts. I don't really understand
where the line is.
Where the restrictions set in. Yeah.
So news is a certain quality, and when you have, if your opinion, however it derived from you, is that, I don't know, the election was rigged, and you get on television and you say, the election was rigged, I feel it in my bones. I know it. I just, I slept last night and it was a dream that came to me, and I'm going to get on TV and I'm going to tell you the election was rigged. And I'm a commentator. I'm an opinionist. All you care about is what my opinion. Do I have to have facts to support that? No. Who's going to tell me that my opinion, I can't state my opinion in America? It's a free country. You can say whatever you want to say. Now, the question is, should Fox News allow you to do it? I think you've had some instances where they've pushed back, but for the most part, they don't. They let you, because people are going to tune in. So if people want to hear you talk about this case of osmosis that, something came to you last night and the election was rigged and that's what you believe and millions of people tune into that, how can we stop you? You could if that was your standard, but obviously that's not your standard. Now, would you go on Chris Wallace's show and say the election was rigged? No, because that's not the standard there. But the standard on Tucker Carlson is different. Same as with, MSNBC. You can get up and say whatever, and, the standard is different.
I can't give you an example, but it seems to me during the election that there were news agencies that reported blatant lies. Ballots were counted, this happened, that happened. And so, I think to me that's the hard part to try to make sense of this, because I sometimes feel like there's one side and there's the other side. It's like your chart, right? And there's one narrative here, there's another narrative here, and each group believes what they're getting is truth. And, obviously it hasn't ended well.
Well, I think one thing you come away from this pandemic learning and understanding is you get what you pay for. If you don't pay for content, the quality of the content is affected. It's sort of like if you buy, a cheap pair of shoes. You might spend $5 on them today, but tomorrow you might need a new pair, whether if you had spent $20 on a pair of shoes. Quality matters, and information quality is what separates people in America, is what I believe truly. Think about COVID. If you got bad information around the pandemic saying you don't need a mask, you don't need to be vaccinated, that doesn't matter, you very well could be dead. And that is the quality of the information. So if you got free information about the pandemic on Facebook, which you go and look at the algorithms which promoted no masks, no vaccinations, everybody interpret the, science like you want to interpret the science. You wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to drink, juice and not get COVID. And if you believe that, and a lot of people did, you paid for it in death, either for you, either for your family, either for your friends. So really the information that's coming at you, if you don't pay for it, meaning if you don't value it enough to put your money behind it, you don't know what you're going to get. So what's changed? Everything. I think we kind of gone over this a little bit, but the internet, Google search, newsrooms, because people don't pay for information, often are driven by how many people come to a story. So they are trying to get a Google search. Search engine optimization is really important, meaning so if you want to know about the California recall and you type in California recall, my job at CalMatters, or the job of CalMatters, is to come up when you type that. Because everyone, when they want to know something, what do? So to get the Google machine to show your content is really important. So you have to look for things like keywords. You have to consider things like what's in the top of a story. So it's a lot of science behind how information is presented and how it comes up on Google search. So quality is important, search engine optimization important. That also, Google search also gave way to this thing we all know called clickbait. Google has sort of downgraded that a bit. So, you know, you might see a crazy headline that gets you to click, but you go to it and it's something different. That's changed a lot, but I'd say about 5 years ago it was really rampant. The other thing, how do you all get your news? How many of you all get a physical paper? Wow. Is that how you get how many of you all get most of your news on your phones? Wow. So I am of the mind, and maybe it's because I'm an old soul, I don't know, that I always want things physical because I don't want you to be able to change a word. I don't want you to be able to change a thing about it. But the reality of it is everything is going on your phones. So with my phone, I can access all my news. I can access the Wall Street Journal. I can easily go say, oh, you know, the New York Times said this, but let me see what the Journal says about this. The New York Times has this opinion. It allows you to compare and contrast. It also keeps you reading news all the time. So your smartphones have changed the way, they've changed the game. So newsrooms are competing. So your local newsroom is competing with the New York Times in a way that years ago it didn't have to. The other thing is social media. How many of you all are on social media? Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Wow. Pinterest? Nice. How many of you all get your news from social media?
Some of them.
Some.
And from magazines, and not from the local paper. That's mostly local news, except for what's expressed in the letters to the editor, which are, in our town is very lively.
Wow.
There's a lot of different viewpoints, so we're kind of a microcosm of that.
That's pretty interesting. So social media is driven by algorithms, which are computers that, well, it's technically not a computer. It is a formula that takes all the information about you and decides what you should see and what you should not see, or what you want and what you don't want. It also can create these sort of echo chambers, and it's one of the reasons why, you know, people are looking into trying to regulate Facebook and all these different social media platforms. But this social media, I think if we go to the next one, all of these things point to now the internet rules. The internet rules everything in terms of information, how you get information, what kind of information you see, and how it's delivered to you. Nearly a third of Americans regularly get their news from Facebook. And this was released in August 8th, 2021. So think about that in terms of, let's just take COVID, for example. If you were one of the third of people who primarily got their news from Facebook, what kind of news did you get about COVID? I mean, and can we blame you if that's all you got? So you were in an echo chamber. So information has, you know, can be life or death. Quality information. 13% of people get their news regularly from Twitter. I think that 13% is mostly journalists. We're always on Twitter. I think it's like, it's a weird thing. 22% get it from YouTube, which is pretty interesting because YouTube algorithms can also be a little scary in what they pre-play and what they show you. I think probably one of the big lessons I learned from this recently was CalMatters. We had all the recall candidates come in, and I saw the Sacramento Bee interviewed Larry Elder, and the first day they had over 1 million views. And I thought, this is strange because they only have a few thousand, views. They may average 1,000 views a video. And so then we had Larry Elder in, and I said, let me see. So I, did the SEO so that when you type up Larry Elder, CalMatters video would appear. And people watched it. And, I thought, this is interesting. But when you think about it, Larry Elder is very big on social media. He's very big on Twitter. He's very big on YouTube. People are really interested in what he has to say. And so when you're looking for Larry Elder, CalMatters will pop up and the Sacramento Bee will pop up and all his followers will go watch the video. And actually the comments were, I was impressed with the comments. They weren't that bad. And I've had some bad, sometimes on YouTube, the comments are so ridiculous. It's unreal. So that's important. The other thing that you see is TikTok. A lot of younger people get their news on TikTok, which I'm a big TikToker, and sometimes you see there's this subculture on TikTok where they take news stories and they pick them apart, and it's not good. It's almost in some ways worse than Facebook, in my opinion. All right, so next slide. So here are the challenges. Local news is shuttering, as we all know. Many people place no value on news or reporting, and we know that because guess what? They don't want to pay for it. They don't pay for it. Misinformation and disinformation, either intentional disinformation or unintentional misinformation, that has a huge effect on this democracy. It has an effect on all of our communities, and we all have to be concerned with it. Distrust. People don't trust the media. I mean, you look at the numbers and you think, I'm shocked that at one point this country, the most trusted man in America was a journalist. Because a lot of people don't trust journalists. They think we wake up in the morning and say, how can I deceive the American public? I'm like, we're not that smart, like we're just trying to inform people about what's happening. And sometimes journalists get it right. And sometimes they make mistakes, but everyone makes mistakes. And so we have to be really thoughtful and really compassionate to the reporters who stand in a line of fire to inform their communities. Solutions.
When do you think this distrust started? And because it seems like distrust of government, distrust of media, is it some, I don't know.
I think it's something that's been brewing for a long time. And it's distrust of everything, like you said, institutions. There is this huge distrust of American institutions, and part of it is that people are waking up and seeing, huge disparities in wealth, in justice in 2008 after the market crash. It's so interesting. I was covering Occupy Oakland at the time, and the talking points for Occupy, everyone thought, those kids are crazy. They're like standing up, they're like, no, something is wrong, something is broken, the 99%. And that was the first time those talking points had really been heard like that. Fast forward 10 years later, everyone is talking about the 99% and the 1% and wealth gaps. That's pretty remarkable in some ways. And it also shows that after the market crashed and people saw their parents, their middle-class parents who had worked, who had done right, who had done everything right, lose their homes, lose everything they had worked so hard for. And at the time, many people felt like, banks had just kind of no one went to jail. And it had an effect on our country Now, whether people, I'm sure someone is studying it, but those kinds of, once people start distrusting institutions, it trickles down into everything. And President Trump just highlighted what was already there. And I think that as a country, if you cannot trust the media, if you can't trust that when someone tells you this is a pandemic, you need to put on a mask, if you can't trust that, then what can you trust? And we're in chaos forever, because how can you function if no one believes the information that you're giving them, even though it's true? Any questions about that?
How do we get it?
If I knew that, I'd be a zillionaire right now.
I've heard that the Russians are kind of behind the social media, pushing distrust in our institutions. I've heard it from a number of people on PBS. To your knowledge, is this true?
Yes, I think it's. In fact, I was looking at a Senate intelligence hearing about a year or two ago, I guess. And what was interesting to me is, it had to be last year. It was after the George Floyd protests, and all these. I was having this discussion with my brother, actually. All these Facebook groups start popping up, basically saying, let's march, or why are we trusting, the Democratic Party, and all these different things. And I remember looking at it and saying, that's kind of interesting. I don't know if I trust that, because, it just, I thought something was wrong with it. And then, a few months later, the Intelligence Committee came out and said, yeah, these were, fake pages by, bots and things like that. And their goal was to sow distrust. And they referenced Russian hackers and things like that. That is true. And it's a national security issue, because if no one trusts the institutions, then what does that mean for the democracy? And I think that's one reason why in California, there was a Senate judiciary hearing for the state legislature a couple week ago. And the conversation was about how can California regulate social media companies. And the big hurdle in the room was what? Section 230. And so in the coming years, there will be a lot of discussions about how to regulate the internet in a way that doesn't, erode the democracy. Will we get there? I don't know. I don't know.
You haven't said much about radio journalism.
Well, which ones? Public? Car Talk? Car Talk is Car Talk. Radio journalism is different in that it's podcasting, it's radio that you turn on, it's internet, it's Alexa. It's changed a ton. Public radio is still the standard when it comes to reporting. I listen to a lot of public radio. I also listen to commercial radio. They do really good in terms of their news shows. Now, the talk shows are the talk shows. But I would recommend, and commercial radio, they still have advertising and things like that. But supporting your local public radio stations are important. A lot of them are getting a lot of support. I know that there's this push now to do more of these regional hubs for newsrooms to allow local radio stations more time to do sort of investigative work and more original content versus just regurgitating sort of what's happening for today. that makes sense. Hopefully that answers your question. But with podcasting and things like that, it's so different. In podcasting, sometimes it's news, sometimes it's entertainment. And that is really hard to make the distinction. Let me go to her and then I'll...
What's your opinion on what's the standard for what I call the conglomerators? The Google News, the Yahoo News. You know, I use Google News. I don't sign in. I don't personalize it. And it seems like I'm getting a fairly broad options in terms of what coverage I'm getting. You know, other than them tracking what stories I choose to click on. In terms of the standards for fact-based and bias, what's your opinion?
I use Google News sometimes. For content, I think it's helpful. I don't think they are intentionally trying to skew you away or not. For me personally, I have my go-tos. So I don't like aggregates. I like to read sort of, okay, this is what's happening in the world according to the Washington Post. This is what's happening in the world according to the New York Times. This is what's happening in the world according to the East Bay Times. This is what's happening. Now, it takes a lot of time to do that. So in absence of that, I think Google News is pretty useful. Any other questions?
There are various fact-checking organizations like PolitiFact, but I'm not sure how many people hear them or believe them. Can you address that? Do you know anything about it?
Yes. So PolitiFact actually, they have some contracts within newsrooms. So you might not know, sometimes they may have their own branding on something, sometimes not. That they work with other newsrooms throughout the country actually to fact check things. The things with the internet, even AP now, they do some fact checking because I'll give you an example. Last week, there was a video of Governor Newsom. And it was a deep fake, meaning it was a fake video that someone had dubbed to make it look real. And the AP, did a story about it. Like, this is a fake video. But by the time the story comes out, people have already seen the video. And so that's the thing with trying to be, it's worth doing, but it's hard to be ahead of the curve because information travels so quickly and bad information gets out there so quickly that, what can you do? I'm sure that deep fake is still on YouTube racking up millions and millions of views. And people are saying, oh, there we go. This is a sign of something. And no one has read, those people in the comments probably have not read the AP news article. And even if they did, they probably wouldn't believe it. That's the sad part.
Yeah, that's one of my concerns is I think that this group is a little unique in that everyone in this room is probably very thoughtful and can put two to two together. If they read something, hear something fishy, they know to investigate. I think the challenge is that chart you showed us where so many people are getting their information from social media. Those people, I feel like, are drawn more by sensationalism than fact. And I think that this whole new wave has kind of tapped into this new, well, and some people might call it human nature. I feel like it makes us all look like junior high schoolers, where we're just responding to what's big and angry. And so part of my challenge is even if we have fact checkers, how do we overcome that part of, I don't want to call it human nature because we're not all like that, but those other human natures of just skipping straight to big emotion and what gets people riled up. Because I feel I have a lot of really, what I would consider pretty intelligent friends that don't take those middle steps, that just jump over those hurdles to get straight to the big fluff.
Yeah.
I know I'm right.
No, I think...
But that's the hurdle I'm seeing for things like that is, well, who cares? Because the people, we all know about them. The people that
Right.
It's almost like you have to oppose that with just as much sensationalism. But the fact of the matter is, the reason I think a lot of it's kind of been bubbling up and now everybody's jumping in is for so long news has not been sensational. I mean, outside the big bad things that happen, because that always happens. But a lot of politics is mundane. A lot of our everyday lives is very mundane. That is the fact of the matter. And it's not as sexy. So it's like, how can we overcome that, right, as a human race, so that we can get back to trust again?
I don't know if I think the cat is out of the bag in terms of trust in some ways. I'll say this, Facebook is changing. Like, they've demoted news in a way. They don't really want you to talk about politics on Facebook anymore. And if you look at your feed, or maybe my feed is just curated this way, but I don't see as many news articles anymore because it made everybody angry, right? And Facebook wants to make you happy. Instagram sort of makes you happy. Facebook makes you mad. And so they've changed how they promote content. The other thing is knowing the world would have us think that everything happens on a national scale, and it does, in a sense. But caring about what's happening locally is just as important as caring about what happens nationally. It is very easy for someone to get on Twitter and say, oh my God, I hate this, I hate Veronda Lyons in Sacramento. I off with her head, right? It's hard to do that when the person you're saying you hate is going to church with you, volunteering with you in your community. So part of it is people, because of the internet, this is my opinion, people feel entitled to pounce on people that they do not know. And they say all kinds of things to people whom they do not know, they will never meet, they will never talk to, and that's just what it is. But when it comes to actually talking about a politician that you do know, that you might see, you tamper things down a little bit. And so I think part of it is looking inward, looking at your community and figuring out how you can converse with people who disagree with you. One of my best, I won't call him my best friend, but one of the closest people that I know is he believes QAnon, he believes all Pizzagate, all these kinds of crazy things. And he trusts me. He lives in Arkansas, an older gentleman, and he will send me articles and say, Byrhonda, is this real? And I would have to say, no, this is not real. And I mean, he sent me stuff all the time. But having that conversation, allowing him the space to be convinced, but then him trusting me enough to say, I know she's not going to try to, I know her. Veronda, is this real? And me saying, no, this is not real, allows him to not feel bad about believing these things, but also feeling, confident enough to ask the question. And I think that's where we have to begin with people who have differences from us. We have to read what they read. We have to understand, in a sense, what they understand, because you get more bees with honey than with vinegar. Okay, let's move forward. Possible solutions. So here's where news is headed, in a sense. The nonprofit news model is where philanthropists and you support news, meaning, news don't have the monopoly on ads anymore. So they don't make money like they used to. So philanthropists give money and, communities give money. Sort of like, what's the big nonprofit in this area? The symphony. You support the symphony, the community supports the symphony, things like that. Subscription-based news. Even subscription-based news, if you really have to pay for how much it costs, sometimes the numbers don't even out. But you pay for a newsroom like the New York Times. You pay, I don't know, what is it, $30 a month or something like that to have access to their content. In turn, they pay their reporters really well. And, the New York Times is publicly traded, so they make money, stocks, things like that. And then there's this new thing happening. Well, not really new. It is a little bit. Journalists, reporters, blogging. So how many of you all are on Twitter? Okay. Every so often, you'll see journalists do this in personal news. It's very bizarre. It's really kind of weird. And they'll say, I'm leaving my job and I'm starting my own blog. And I'd like you to pay me $10 a month for my reporting. And recently, these have been really great reporters from like the New York Times or the Washington Post, and they'll go to a thing called Substack. Substack will give them some money. Sometimes it's Substack, sometimes it's not. And you'll basically pay that individual reporter to report. So to give you a weekly newsletter or a monthly newsletter, and it be original content. And there are more and more journalists who are going that route. Some of them don't have the same level of editing as, say, they would if they were at a major news organization. They don't have the same level of lawyering as they would at a regular news organization. So there is some risk there. But that's pretty much where things are headed. Nonprofit is where it's going. CalMatters is a nonprofit. A lot of new ProPublica. How many of you all read ProPublica? They're a nonprofit. Center for Investigative Reporting, Reveal is a nonprofit. KQED is a nonprofit newsroom. So that's where a lot of newsrooms are headed. Next slide. So basically, my entire thing is, if you want quality news, you need to what? Nothing is free. Information can kill you. The wrong information can kill you. And we have to be just as vigilant about getting the right kinds of content and making sure that we are feeding our minds organic food versus, McDonald's every day. All right, let's go.
So here's the problem with paying for it, which is people with a lot of money are going to pay for news or information that will get spread out because they have a lot of money for their own particular point of view. You follow what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And some of us that don't have a lot of money but want to support a particular news source, let's see, how do I say it? I feel like the lot of money is going to win. That's what I'm saying.
I can see that, and maybe they will win.
They already are.
Or like the New York Times. The New York Times is awash with cash. I mean, the President Trump also helped them make a lot of money. He was, for whatever, he brought a lot of eyeballs to news. Whatever you want to think about him, he was very good at that. So yes, I agree. When you pay for it, the lot of money wins. And I think that as long as you think you're getting quality information, as long as it's fitting what you need, then I think it's a decision that each individual just have to have. Because even subscribing to the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal is really expensive. And if I didn't have a partner we split media, we have a media budget. And it's like $100 a month, which is not cheap. It's expensive. But one thing worth noting is a lot of libraries have subscriptions to major newsrooms. So sometimes you might not even have to pay for it. For example, they might have on their website, you might be able to log in. If you go to the library, you can pick up the newspaper of the week or, the Sunday paper. A a lot of libraries have subscriptions to those major newsrooms. So that's one hack.
So, I'm a little unusual in the group in that I don't live in Nevada County. I live in Placer County, and Colfax, which is basically a news desert. There's not a good county paper, and so I have trouble getting local news, and wondered if you have any suggestions, because I would imagine, I mean, this is like big swaths of our country live in these news deserts. And so do you have any suggestions?
You know, and it might be something that you're not interested in hearing, but I've seen communities come together and start doing their own reporting. And it's, you know, like it's not, it may not win you a Pulitzer, right? But anytime you're in a county that's making decisions and there's nobody watching and nobody documenting, that's a problem. And so there is a newsroom that, or I would call it a newsroom, volunteers got together and, you know, they would rotate. All right, I'll go to the meeting today, or I'll go here, there. And that proved, it wasn't profitable, but the work was important for the community, because when you don't have anyone watching, a lot can go on. So that's the only advice I have, because even when you have larger, I live in Richmond, El Sobrante area. And, you know, we have Bay Area News Group, we have the, you know, KQED, but they don't cover Richmond, like I want to know what's going on. So I like follow people that I know that are like really involved, but I'm really ill-informed about a lot of issues because it's a news desert in a sense. So it's all over the country, like you said.
It seems like journalism is going away, and it's headed towards individuals on Twitter or, you know, like, so my question, I think, is, what do you think's this will be like 100 years from now?
I cannot call it. I do not think journalism is going away. I do not think that. I think that there's an opportunity. What I think is going away is redundancy. You don't need a reporter from Placer County in Washington, D.C. to tell you what's happening in D.C. You don't need that. You do need more reporters in Placer County. The question is, who's going to pay for them? And that rests on the community. If the community cares about information and if they care about keeping their politicians honest, then the community has to come together and say, okay, we're going to have a reporter. And I think you're going to have more places saying that. Because on one end, you have journalists who are more on Twitter, but guess what? When it's a really good investigative story, people hand over their wallets and give it to, you know, ProPublica, for instance. When they do a really great story, people are like, okay, yes, here's my money, take it. And that happens on a national level. And I think that that can happen on a local level. But the reality is the business model of selling ads is gone. So who pays for that? The subscribers. And can you charge them enough to actually support a newsroom? And that's where it gets challenging. So, yeah, there is a push in the new budget to allow a tax write-off for small newsrooms, small to medium newsrooms, so that they can write off some of the, I think it's the payroll taxes that's associated with reporters. And ideally, they want to get more reporters in newsrooms. But I think community-wide, communities are just going to have to make that decision.
referred his readers to CalMatters for local news, so I thought that's a positive for you.
Say that again now? Let me put my glasses on so I can see what you're saying.
One of our local editorialists or
Oh.
opinion writers referred his readers to CalMatters as a source for local news because he feels that we don't have enough state news in our community.
Well, that's great for us. I mean, we try to keep the politicians honest. Yeah, it's a good luck. I mean, it's a one.
Isn't it possible that an organization like CalMatters would have satellite, regional offices focused on, so that Placer County would have a reporter, Nevada County, and so on?
I think that that's the future. I think that we could definitely do that. I think CalMatters is ripe for those kinds of opportunities just because we cover the state. The challenge, as you know, is paying for it. But I think that's the future of where we're headed because some of the best news happens at the local level. And when you don't have anyone watching, you never know what's going on. Like I really like sending public records. And I send a public records request to every police agency in the state. And the responses were very interesting in that some areas just have never had anyone to ask them for records, And so they were like, oh, yeah, here. Or some people were like, no, we're not giving you that, even though it was legal. But they felt empowered to say no because no one is watching. And journalistically, I think as communities, one thing people have to be prepared for when they hire journalists or when they're looking at reporting is be prepared to hear what you don't want to hear. Be prepared to hear that your favorite politician is a crook. Be prepared to hear state sent this document and they're like, oh, we're so great. And I looked at the numbers. I'm like, I don't think y'all were expecting me to go this deep. But I went into the story and it was a sad story in that, not a lot of people are going to law school. But the second story was about Imperial County. Would you believe that Imperial County has the most diverse bench in California? And do you know how they did it? Through elections. They elect their judges. It's kind of the wild, wild west of elections because you might get thrown out at any point. But it was an interesting story in that when people think of Imperial County, that's probably not what they think. Like this is a really diverse bench. Not only did I tell them about, this is a problem statewide, but I also came back and wrote a story about where they're doing it right and how they did it. And they did it through elections. In fact, a former Imperial County judge now is nominated for the Southern federal bench now. And she would be the second Imperial County judge to be on the federal bench. Weird, Imperial County, who would have ever thought? So that's all. I'll be here if you want to chat some more. And thank you. Oh, yeah. Great. This is great.